Hi everybody, I'm Mickey Stewie and I got up early this morning. It's 8 a.m. here in California and it's kind of refreshing to start my day with a presentation instead of ending it. What we're going to talk about today are the Tablix control, and what it really is three different templates in the toolbox, which they call them controls, but they're really underlying is the Tablix control itself. So you have the table, which is your traditional grid that you can group different rows to have data consolidated on your screen or in your report. You also have the list control, which I think is analogous to the way we used to develop access reports or access forms. You can lay your elements all over the list control and it will repeat that for every row. So it gives you more freedom. And then finally there's the matrix, and the matrix is my favorite out of all of them because it's something that you didn't have prior to 2008. And what it allows you to do is it allows you to have columns grow dynamically, vertically as well as horizontally. And we're going to take a look at some ways to manipulate these three in various reports. So the very first report that I'm going to show you, I call the Sales Team Assignment Report, and I'm going to demo it for you. I spend most of my time demoing my, my reports, but you'll have the freedom to look back at the slide deck afterwards. So let's take a look at the first one. What I have is I have a couple of parameters, and we're going to utilize them. The first one is showing territory groups, which will help us minimize or reduce our data set. And the final one, the collapsed data, is actually going to tell us how much data to display when the report is first rendered. What we have here is, we have three different columns. Isn't that my beautiful circle right there? Let's try a square. That would be much better. Three different columns here. So this report is growing horizontally, but it's also growing vertically when you look at the fact we have Canada and we have United States. Now I have the territory group parameter up here, and when I remove Europe, we're going to see less data. Now we only have two columns. And that's the beauty of the matrix. But I'm also using another Tablix control in there, and I'll show you how those two work together to get that dynamic look to the report. If I go to my second page, that's where I see where I use the collapsed data. And now I have each of the sales reps with their stores underneath them. This allows me, let me put it to no so you can see how it looks with that option. This allows me to give this report to different kinds of people in the business. One person may not care what the stores are, they just want to see the totals, but sometimes they want to see it, and then you have someone who only wants to look at their store numbers. And now I've satisfied multiple people with one report. So let's take a look at how we build that. I'm going to go ahead and open up my report, and what I have here is the beginning. I created a template that all my reports are based off, and they all have the same thing. They have a title area, a logo area, some information in the footer, and I also created this Tablix that is my palette. And after my report is finished being designed, I just delete the palette. But now I don't have to go hunt for the hexadecimal colors to make sure all my reports are the same color. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by putting a matrix control on the report. This is the control that is going to allow us to grow our data horizontally, to go across the screen. Now because I want it to grow horizontally, I don't care about this first column, which is showing us information row by row. So I'm going to delete it. I also need to assign the control its data set. So I'm going to right click up here in the square. I'm going to select Table Properties. I'm going to select the data set, which is Sales Team Assignment Report, and hit OK. Now, the beauty of the trick for this one is that I have a matrix that's going to control going across, and I have a table that's going to control the country regions that we saw inside that had the various rows. And that's what I created over here. And I went ahead and I created it ahead of time so that you didn't have to watch me put it together, because I have a lot of information to show in this hour. So let's finish this Tablix control. It already comes with a column that's grouped, and you can see this by the sideways parenthesis. You can also see it by coming down at the bottom of the screen and seeing the column groups, and there's a column group already. Since it's there, I'm going to go ahead and go into the properties, go to group properties, and we're going to set the various properties for it. I'm going to select territory group, and I'm going to go to sorting and make sure that it's set as well. Because I came to set the properties manually, it didn't give me a default sorting option. So I'm going to go ahead and add territory group here as well. Now I've got the territory groups, but I need to be able to see it, the actual values. So I'm going to go ahead and select territory group to display in the top cell. Because I like color and I'm not a big fan of lines, I'm going to select each row and remove the lines by setting the border style to none. And I'm going to do that for the next row. Unfortunately, you can't do this for the entire table at the same time. It'll just do the outer cells of the entire control. You have to do it for each row because you have lines that are going for each cell. Now I'm going to go ahead and select a color from my color palette by selecting the background color and copying and pasting it for the top row. Apparently I hit X instead of copy. So let's go ahead and change the background color. I picked a dark color. Oh, I hit the wrong thing. Let's try that again. We're going to select my cell, go to background color, copy. There we go. Select my row, paste it, and since I picked a dark color, I'm going to go ahead and change the font color to white so that we can read it. Now the other thing that I need to do is I need to make this cell as large as this table, because I'm going to take this table and drop it in that cell. If I were to drop the table in that cell right now, it would reduce proportionately the table, and I would have to then resize everything. So what I always do is I create the table exactly the way I want it to be displayed. I find the outer dimensions and create the holding cell to be those same dimensions. So here we have a width of 2.4 and a height of 0.5. So I'm going to change the cell to 2.4 and the height to 0.5. Now I can simply grab the table. Notice what I did, in case you're not familiar. I clicked on the square and it gave me the outer edge. I can now hit Control X to cut it, click on the cell, Control V, and it pastes it right in, and I don't have to rearrange the dimensions of the table itself. Now, before I show you what it looks like, I did want to point out, what if I needed another column in that inner table? If I were to add an inner column, it would proportionately move everything out, but it won't change the size of that outer cell. So what you need to do is you need to grab this inner table, and you need to pay attention to the edges, because if you click on the wrong part of the controls, you're going to get a different table. So now I can right-click on that square again, hit Select. I want the Tablix. No, that gave me the outer one. I want the inner one. There we go. See, it's a hard thing to do, but once you get it, come on. Okay, now I have the edge of the cell. I can hit Control K, Control X, click outside, Control V, and now I'm able to manipulate it, and then I can put it right back in its home. So let's take a look at what we have so far. When it generates, I have each of my columns for each of my territory groups. They're all different heights, but notice they're all kind of pushed together. It would be nice to have some separation. So let's figure out how to create a gutter. And before I do that, let's show you that if I remove Europe, I minimize down to 2 columns. So now it's very dynamic and free-flowing. That I was so happy when I was able to start doing that, because 2005 you couldn't do that, at least not in a way I was able to figure out. So to create a gutter, what we're going to do is we're going to add an extra column, and it's kind of a faux column. We're not going to put anything in it, but it's going to act as our gutter. So I have my group, and I need the gutter to be inside the group because it needs to repeat for every column. So I'm going to go ahead and insert a column inside the group to the right. I'm going to make the width 0.1, but you need to select one cell in order to do that. So let's go down here, select cell, width 0.1. The top, because I used this special area above the dotted lines, it went ahead and merged the cells inside the group. So I need to unmerge them by splitting the cells and selecting this one cell here and taking the color away. That way we don't have any color going across the top. Now when I display my report, we're going to have a nice gutter, and that way we have some nice separation. The downside is there's going to be a 0.1 gutter over here on the right side. I tried really hard to figure out how to eliminate that or suppress it, and I couldn't. But that's a small price to pay to have a nicely formatted form. And just so you know, each of these columns, when you add the real column and the gutter, is 2.5, because you can get 3 columns of 2.5 inches across a portrait sheet of paper. So now let's continue to the second page. The second page had all of the data. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my second page where I've started it. I've already started 2 rows. And the reason for that is it takes a lot of time to build this, and I have 1 hour. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and add the groups for the country, region, and the territory group. One thing that I want you to notice is over here on the left side of the Tablix, you have some symbols. I already talked about the parenthesis being the grouping symbol, and you have 3 dashes to tell you that there's a detail row. If I were to turn this detail row into a grouping row, the dashes would go away and you'd be left with another parenthesis. And that's a very good indicator on how to quickly read your Tablix when you first come in and look at somebody else's work. So we're going to add some new groups here. So I'm going to go ahead and select this top row. I'm going to right click, add group, parent group. I'm going to add a country, region, and a group header, and that will provide me an extra row between the sales name and the store header at the top. If I hit OK, it gives me that information. It also gave me this lovely column to the left, which is a really nice grouping feature, but I personally don't like the country, region name wrapping into the column. I prefer to see it go across the top of the names, and so I'm going to show you how to do that. But we need to add our other group, and I'm going to show you a second way. You can come down here to row group, click on country, region, add a group, add a parent group, and now we can add a territory group, and it's the same way that I showed you how to do at the top for the Tablix. I also want to have my add group header and hit OK. Now if you accidentally forgot to do that, you can manually add it. You could also hit Control X, it would remove the group, and then you can go back through the steps and make sure that you have that header row. Since I don't care about these 2 columns, I'm going to go ahead and delete them. The reason why I can't keep them and use them is this dotted line right here. And then let me increase the screen. See, you can see that there is some dashed lines right here. And that is to indicate it's like a barrier. You can't merge cells across it. So that's why we're going to create our own columns. So let's delete these. And now I'm going to create 2 new columns, but it's to the right of that barrier. Insert to the left, right click, insert to the left. Okay. So now I'm going to add my country region, and I'm going to merge some cells so that the name can go across the top. So I selected the cells, I right-clicked, and I hit Merge Cells. And I did it by including one column here because we're going to use this as a stepping feature. I'm going to do that again to the top, right-click, Merge Cells, and now I'm going to add my values, my territory group, and my country region. Since I want each of these steps to be 0.25 inches, I'm going to select a cell in each of the columns and change the size. So now the width will be 0.25 and 0.25. And the last thing I need to do is to change the colors so that you can see the steps clearer. Some people like to have entire rows be a particular color, but I like to have it more dramatic. So I'm going to go ahead and select these 3 cells. No, that's not going to let me do that. So I'm going to select 2 cells and change it to no color, and this third one, change it to new color. Then I'm going to use my color palette to quickly grab my hexadecimal colors and change each of the rows to their corresponding color to show a nice gradient of color. And do this to this top row. Now because this entire row is 1, I can select the entire row. I had to do the individual cells so that I could keep my steps clear. All right, so now we can go ahead and take a look at what we've done. Go ahead and set the value, which we haven't tied to the table set yet. Oh, I forgot to they like to drop in a table header value for you, but I don't need it, so I'll go ahead and delete it. So what we can see is we have Europe, France, and Mr. I'm going to chop up his name, so I'm going to go ahead and leave it alone. But we can see that we have a stepped value here and all our stores below. So a couple of things that I want to do. One of the things I want to do from here is I want to tie it to this collapse data parameters so that it can be collapsed for various people. The other thing that I want to do is I want to create a green bar effect so that you can tie the stores to their numbers easier, because I personally have a hard time going across a lot of white space. So let's see how to do that. Let's remove these headers because we don't need them. And now what we're going to do is we're going to tie each of the groups. So the first thing you need to know is what each of the names of the cells are. So territory group, and I come over here, it tells me it's territory group 1. Country region is country region. And the name is called salesperson. And what I can do is if I didn't want to call this territory group 1, I could come into the name property and change it, which is very helpful if it says text box 1. You could go give it a better name. Territory group itself is used up in this top one, so I can't use it because it's once on the entire sheet. So we are going to select each row. Okay, this is very important. When I want to collapse rows, I don't want to select a particular cell or you get a funny thing happening, and I'll show it to you. You want to make sure you are either selecting groups or entire rows. So we're going to tie each of these groups to each of those cells. So when I click on territory group, I want the country region to collapse. So you go into country region, group properties, visibility, set display can be toggled by this report item, and set that parent value to territory group 1. We're going to set the same thing for the salesperson. Now in the AdventureWorks database, the primary key is called Business Entity ID. And that's where that value, that name, that property name, field name came from. So I need, let's do that again. Select Group Properties, Visibility, and I'm going to set it to Country Region. Okay. Now to show you that funny effect, because I've done it many times, I'm going to select that just store. I'm going to select its text box properties, visibility, and I'm going to set it to salesperson, and we'll see what happens. I'm going to go ahead and preview it. We haven't tied it to the parameter yet. We'll do that in a minute. When I come down here, we can see we have plus signs. And when I select salesperson, notice what happened. The store names went away, which I expected, but I was left with all the totals. That's not a good way to do business. So we're going to go ahead and fix that. At the same time, I'm going to go ahead and tie it to the collapse data to save some time. Now the other thing you can notice is these are plus signs. If I look at report data, plus signs over here meant that they're collapsed. Well, they start off as plus signs as the default, so we're going to have to set the initial property, I can't remember the initial toggle property, so that you can see it start off as negative signs. So let's go do that. I need to remove the collapsing on the store, so let's go ahead and remove that. Visibility, and uncheck it. It'll go ahead and remove that value, and I hit OK. We're going to put it on the entire row, but we're also going to tie it to that parameter. So for the row, I'm going to go to row visibility. I'm going to go ahead and say that the salesperson can toggle this, and I'm also going to tie the show and hide to an expression that will be linked to that parameter. Now I have a cheat sheet over here so that you don't have to watch me type code. And this is something that I actually encourage you to do. Create a knowledge-based document so that you have tips and tricks and things that you found on the internet. I made my knowledge-based document have 3 columns. The first had the date and a quick search word that my brain would key off of. The middle column would have the code, a description of how to use it, when not to use it, and the URL to where I found it on the internet. And the third column had my name, and that way when I gave the document to my coworkers, they knew to come find me for that particular item, and I let them add to the same document. So let's go ahead and grab this line of code. And before I paste it in, it's easier to talk about it here. I have my parameter value. When it is yes, I'm going to hide the data, and when it's no, I'm going to display the data. To me, that's counterintuitive, the true and the false, but that's the way it's set up. I think my brain is just wired backwards sometimes. And I hope you're laughing because I can't hear you. So let's go back to our document, our report, and I'm going to go ahead and paste it in, and I'm going to hit OK. Now remember I talked about the initial toggle property. We also need to put that same formula on the initial toggle property for the for the sales rep so that it will change from plus to minus when it starts up. Because just because it's being utilized doesn't mean it's going to change for us. Only when the report is rendered will the plus and minus automatically change for us. So I've selected the salesperson text box. And now I'm going to move down to initial toggle state. I'm going to bring the drop-down box and hit expression. I'm going to use the same expression, but I need to reverse the true and false because of the behavior of the initial setting of that property. I'm also going to go to country region and territory region and change it from false to true so that it starts off with a negative sign, which is what we would expect for that control. Now I can go ahead and hit preview, and we'll see what happens. We're going to start collapse data as yes, and when we look at the data, we can see that it's collapsed and we have the correct minuses and pluses. And when I click on it, we get all of the store data. And the same thing would happen if we selected the opposite value for no. So now let's add the green bar effect. Now this is the simple green bar effect, and I only want to put it on these 2 cells. So I'm going to go ahead and select them. I'm going to go to the expression for country background, and I'm going to go select my formula. Now here's the formula. This is I call it the simple one because it works in this environment. If you're trying to do a green bar on a group, you have to use a more complicated version of a formula, and I'll show that in another demo. But what it's doing is it's looking at the row number that's given by SSRS. If it's divisible by 2, it's going to give us 1 or 0 because I'm using the mod operator. When it is one of those values, it's going to give me this hexadecimal color, and when it's the other, it's going to be transparent. Now, when you're using this formula, and I'm going to talk while I paste it in, you're going to find that you're going to get an output error when you render it. It's not detrimental. I've been using it for years. It doesn't like to put transparent on the row. The reason why I use transparent is if I have a watermark on my report, transparent will allow that watermark to show through. If I'm using the color white, it will actually color it white, which doesn't print, but now you can't see your watermark. So let's go ahead and preview it. We'll select no this time. And now when I look at it, there's a very faint green green bar effect, and now I can read it easier. The other thing that I want to do is I want this grid to be on the first page only, and I want this to start on the second page. I'm not going to go ahead and render it, but I'll show you how to do that. What you can do is you select the top outer matrix, you go into its properties, and you select Add Break After. And what it'll do is it'll put a page break after that control is done rendering. It's very important that you have the next control butt up right up to it, otherwise you're going to get a lot of white space at the top of the second page. You could have done it the other way and had it break at the beginning of this, but then again that white space would have been at the bottom of the preceding pages, which could in fact give you a blank page. So you're going to want to make sure these guys are best friends. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and move on to the second demo. The second demo, let's show what the end result will be. This one, this is one of my favorites, and I have a great story about it. So I used to work at a company that needed to show images with text, and it could show 1 to 3 images. And they didn't want a lot of white space when there was one image, and sometimes there was no images as well. And so they asked me to figure out a way to lay out the report and reclaim that white space. And you can't do that naturally. So what I had to do is figure out a technique, and that's what I've done here. If you notice right here, I don't have any white space, and that's because there wasn't an image for this mountain bike socks. So let's see how we can duplicate this. I'm going to start with just a regular table, and I'm going to tie it to my data set. And I just need the detail. Now this is the trick. There are 2 detail rows, so I'm going to insert another row inside the group below. Notice they both have dashes. That means if I were to leave them as is and put values, it would repeat, and I'd have 2 of everything. So what we're going to do is we're going to hide one when there's no image. For this report, I only need 2 columns, so I can delete this column, and I can increase this one. The first column has the name of the product, and let's create it a little wider. I'm a big color person, so even though this is a demo, I'm going to color my top row, so it makes me feel good. Paste. What's the other thing? I'm going to go ahead and leave the outlines around the cells. The second row also gets name. I'm going to make each of these a little wider to handle the image. The second one doesn't need to be wider. Now, in order to put 2 controls in this cell, I need to add a rectangle. And guess what the secret is here? The secret is a table with a rectangle in it is really a list control. So I could have started with the list control and ended up exactly where I am right now. And I'll show you that in the third demo. So now if I click on name and I look at the properties, you see text box right here. But if I click on this one, you see that it says rectangle. And that's because I dropped a rectangle. You don't have to actually draw it. Select the cell. I clicked on rectangle and I clicked on the cell and it filled the whole cell with the rectangle. Now I can go ahead and drop an image control on here. And for my data set, I have the images in the database itself. So I'm going to go ahead and select thumbnail photo, and it's a JPEG. Make it a square, put it up in there, okay. And then I want to add my comment. So I'm going to go grab my comments and drop it in here. And when I get the edges, I can move it and make it the rest of the width. Now for the second row, it's going to have comments only because there's no image. I happen to know that for this data set, when the image's primary key is 1, it means there's no image. And that's what I'm going to use to hide one row and keep the other. So we're going to go ahead and right-click on this row, go to Row Visibility, and add a formula to show and hide. So let's go ahead and grab that. Yep, Demo 2. So what I have is when I'm looking at the product photo ID value, and when it's 1, I'm going to hide it, otherwise I'm going to show it. Notice I put a little comment here, row visibility with image. That way it makes sure I put it in the right place. Okay, and I'm going to paste that in. And then on the second row, we're going to put the same formula, but we're going to flip the second 2 parameter values. Paste it in, move the true to the end, and that is it to this. But remember what I talked about the lines? Notice there's going to be some lines missing. We can go ahead and see I've got some errors because I used the word transparent. That's okay. Okay, so here we have our data, and notice there is no white space right here, and we've reclaimed our space, which is really nice. But notice on this one that there is some lines missing right here. That's because the rectangle doesn't naturally come with lines, and it's replaced the contents of that cell, and the lines don't show through. So if I were to want to keep the lines, I would want to select the rectangle and go ahead and put my border style back to solid for the default, and make sure I'm using the exact same color lines as the others, and they're using light gray, not black. So let's change that to light gray. So now you're going to get the lines, and it looks like it all came from the same data set. And that's my second demo. So let's take a look at the third demo. We are doing great on time today. I'm very happy. Okay, so the second one is an employee list. And what we have is a couple things. Notice that I have the name staying at the top. It'll also going to reappear on the second page and keep scrolling down. It's a really nice feature when they're using the reports online. The other thing that I want you to notice, which is why we're in here, is these 3 columns. This data is actually given in 3 different rows, and I've changed my table control to act like a matrix so that I get a separate column for each phone number. Now the beauty of this is if they decide to add maybe a cell phone too, or we decided to go retro and add a pager, I can add that data to the database and I don't have to change my report. It's going to automatically create new columns for each of those new types of phone number. Yes, it will push the report and I will get a second page, but it will go ahead and print it out beautifully. The addresses will get moved over. When that happens, or if you plan for it, make sure that your title is actually on on the first 8 inches of the width of your report. Otherwise, you'll never see the title. The title will go ahead and, because it's in the header, it will go ahead and repaint on each page, even when it's growing horizontally. So let's see how to create this. I'm going to go ahead and open my template here. We are going to start with a traditional table. I'm going to tie my data set to it. And so that you can see what the data set looks like naturally, I do have it render in its ugly format. And here it just has everything going straight across, including the addresses. Now, because everything kind of got compounded because of the way I brought the data over, you get some duplicates. If I were to just have phone numbers, then I wouldn't be seeing duplicate data, but I have phone numbers and addresses, and because of the way I brought the data set in for this demo, you see duplicate data, but you won't on the finished report. But you can see that Kim just has a cell phone and a home phone. Alderson has a home and a work, and then they have their addresses. So let's see how to lay this out. Let's see, we already added the data set. So now we're going to add first name and last name for 2 columns. I'm going to go ahead and colorize my top because I like color. And standards are always a good thing to have. Now what I want to do is I want to put my phone numbers. And because I want it to dynamically create my phone numbers, I'm going to add a group right here. In order to create a column group, I need to select the cell, not the column and not this header one. I want to select the cell on the detail row. I'm going to right-click, insert, add group. I'm going to add a parent group to the column, and it's going to be based on phone number type. I don't want to add a group header though, so I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. It does think that I need this special row. This is above that dashed line barrier that I talked about earlier. Since I don't want it, I'm going to go ahead and delete it. Now, don't panic when you see this. This is okay. It's just wanting me to verify, did I want to get rid of just that one row or did I want to get rid of the column group? Make sure you select only the column, only the row. You don't want to get rid of the group you just created. I still want the phone number type to be displayed, which said cell, work, and home. So I'm going to go ahead and display phone number type, which was what we grouped on. Now I want to show the phone number in here, so I can go ahead and select phone number. It created our phone number type down here, and so I'm just going to show you the properties. It has the phone number type, and it also set the sorting for us. Because I have data that is duplicating, I do need to have my detail be changed from a detail row to a group. So I'm going to go ahead and select the row. I'm going to come down here to row groups, select group properties, and I'm going to change my detail row to a group row by adding a group expression. We're going to group on business entity ID, which is the primary key for each person. The reason I'm selecting the primary key is we may have multiple people with the same name, and we don't want them to be all squished together and everybody think they're one person. The thing is, I don't want it sorted by the primary key, so I'm going to come to sorting and I'm going to add last name and first name. Now, because I can still have people with the same name, I do want to add one more value that will still distinguish them as a unique individual so that the report will display the exact same way no matter what server it's deployed on. And in this case, I'm going to use the primary key. So now when I display my report, it's going to be sorted, and by, here we go, Kim's at the top, and we're going to go ahead and have 3 columns. Now what if a 4th one comes in? Well, let's do that. Here in SQL Server, I have a script. It's going to create a new phone number type. And then I'm going to add a new phone number for Kim at the top. All right, I've got my new data. I come back in here, I refresh it, and voila, I have cell 2. And I didn't have to change my report at all. So that's a really nice feature of this. Now I want to add an address to the right. This I didn't even know I could do until like a year ago, and I was so happy I figured it out. Just because I have a group at the end doesn't mean that has to be my end column. I can go ahead and right-click on the column, insert a group or a column outside of the group to the right. And now I have a plain column outside of the group. And that's really handy because now I don't have to put those phone numbers at the end of the report. I could put them anywhere I want in my table and then continue with regular data. In this case, I want the addresses. Now, because I want the address to be displayed like you would if you were to put it on an envelope, I'm going to have to do some things in this cell. And that's where my list control is going to come into play. So I'm going to go ahead and hit list. It's going to create this nice box. And if you click on the edge, see if we can get the edge to appear for me. There we go. Look it. It's a Tablix with one cell, one row, one column, and in the middle is a rectangle. Because I want the address and I want the address type, I'm going to go ahead, right-click on my column, insert column to the left. I've created a new column, but this one has a text box, just as if I had started with the table. So let's go ahead and tie this to our data set. Note, if I had dropped this table directly into the cell, it would automatically inherit the data set, but I'm building it first and then dropping it in there. It has to be the same data set as the parent container. For this cell, I'm going to go ahead and put the address type. Here we go, address type. And now I'm going to put my different values for my address. So let's go ahead and grab them. I have address line 1, and just like in Access, we can draw them however we want. And so that I finish my demo in time and have time for you, I'm just going to put, I'm just going to go ahead and draw them all for you. It doesn't take that much time. Oops, let's put state. I'm going to leave zip code off. All right. And let's shrink this up. And now I want to find the outer dimensions, which is over here in size. Copy that. It's not a very beautiful number. And then this is 0.6. Perfect. Now it's the exact same size. I can go ahead and cut my list control, drop it in here. Let's put a title, address. Okay. And now when I run it, let's see what we get. Oh, I forgot to group on the address type. So let's go ahead and do that. For address type, we're going to group it on, we're going to change the detail to make it a group by adding address type. There we go. And now when I preview it, there we go. Now remember what we talked about with the on the previous one, the lines on the rectangle are missing, but that's okay. So now I want to do the green bar effect on this. The reason why I have to use a more complicated green bar approach is because we have some column groups and we have the list box control. And for that, we're going to go ahead and look at some code. This is actually VB code. I'm creating a function called alternate color. It's going to have the odd color and the even color, which in our case is a hexadecimal color and transparent, and then the toggle switch. The toggle switch is only used in the first cell, and it says, hey, I'm on a new row, go ahead and change it to the other color. And that's all it's doing. So we are going to go ahead and drop this on the entire row, or sorry, first we have to put it in the in the report. Now, if I'm working in here, let's see, how did I get that? Sometimes when you are working in here, this report menu might be missing. If it's missing, just click on the report body itself and the report menu will come back up. That's more prevalent in 2008. I'm going to go into Report Properties, Code, and this is where I put any VB code that I happen to write. Now I can go ahead and select my row, go to Background Color, Expression. I'm going to go back to my cheat sheet here, and I'm going to grab, I'm going to actually do this differently. I'm going to put the false on everybody, and then we're going to change the first column to true. And this just makes less typing for me. So now I'm going to go to the first column, and I'm going to go back into Expression and change that false to true. I'm also going to go ahead and remove the rest of the lines by changing, you're going to let me do that? Okay. I think it's because I have the list control in there. I would have to do it on each of the cells. There we go. Now we can go ahead and change this to none. Preview it, and we have some nice colors. And again, this transparent is not going to hurt anything. It's just saying, hey, I don't like that. All right, so the last thing that we wanted to talk about was making this header float, right, and repeat. Now, there's this super secret handshake that you have to do, and let me show you where it is. Right here. This little itty-bitty triangle that has no name is the super secret sauce. When you click it, it goes to advanced mode. They really need to put a name on there because that's not obvious at all. What it allows you to do is it allows you to get to the properties of the titles, the labels for your fields. So we're going to select static, and that's going to give us this top row. I can now come over to properties. I can change fixed data to true and repeat on new page, and that's it for this one. So now when I hit preview and I go ahead and I scroll, the top row stays the same, and when I go to the next page, it's appearing at the top. Okay? And that is my third demo. So let's go back to PowerPoint. I have this all talked about in each of my slides, but now I am ready for some questions.
Okay, great. And we do have some questions. So I'll just start at the beginning. So these would be from earlier in your presentation. Is there a way to fix the Tablix to a set number of rows and an exact amount of vertical space for the Tablix? It seems that the Tablix reserves some additional space below the Tablix, which interferes when placing reports into the items below.
Okay. You do have to do math to determine what your height size is, but usually what gets you into trouble is any white space that you've left right here or over here. So you really need to tighten this up and get rid of it. Other than that, it's just playing with it. Make sure that you don't have a row that's not being used that's 1 pixel high, because 1 pixel row can push you to that next page. And if you need more information on that particular question, let me know that.
Okay, great. Our next question is, did you have to create the row groups lower, it was in the lower left corner of your screen, or were they available dimensions?
Can you say that again?
Did you have to create the row groups, or were they available dimensions?
For the reports that I displayed today was all just traditional data from a, gosh, I can't think of the word. It's not dimensional data. It's just regular rows that had repeating data. So I went ahead and grouped the data. If I had the data already grouped in my data set, then I wouldn't need to create the row groups because it was grouped when I received the data.
Okay.
I hope that answers the question.
We have another question about row group. When you add a row group with that new column that doesn't let you merge with the other cells to the right, what can you do? What you can do is split that column and then you'll be able to merge. So I guess that was more of a tip.
You can split it, but you cannot split it across that barrier. Let me create a new one here. And go grab a Tablix. And let's zoom. See, if I add, let's see, how am I going to do that? Let's add a new row, insert a row inside group below. Okay, so this cell, I can go ahead and split it, but I can't take this cell and merge it. Notice there's no merging option, and it's because of this barrier that it creates. This one right here and this one right here. You can't merge across that. And that's why I removed this column and created new columns to allow me to create the merge cells.
Okay, great. Our next question is, could you have added the expression onto the image itself and not added the extra row?
No, because it would leave that space. You can't dynamically move the comments during rendering, the comments control, to take that space away or to fill in the space. If you can, send it to me because I'd love to know that, but no, you can't.
Okay, great. Our next question is, for creating the EMP phone list, phone list?
Oh, employee.
Employee.
Yes.
Okay, sorry. I'm terrible with abbreviations.
That's okay.
Is there a reason why you used a table and created the group as opposed to using a matrix?
Oh, I could have started with a matrix, but I wanted to show you the flexibility of starting with the table and turning it into a matrix. I find 99% of the time I'm working with the matrix and then moving everything around, and sometimes I end up with it looking more like a table than a matrix. So I wanted to show you that you can morph them into each other. So yes, you can start with the matrix.
Okay. Is there a way to link one Tablix to multiple data sets?
Yes and no. Not if you want to deal with a lot of data. With 2008 R2, they introduced some functions where you can reference other data sets. This can be useful if you want to get some aggregate data, but not if you want to show data, a whole bunch of data. It's going to be slow.
Okay, and we've gotten several requests for if you could share, or if you already have it posted, your SSRS knowledge base documents.
My knowledge base document, I won't give out because when I was creating it, I didn't put the URL, so I can't give credit where credit is due. Because when I started creating that knowledge base document, I didn't plan to be a speaker. And so now that I'm a speaker and I want to share the knowledge, I can only do that when stuff where I know where I got it or I designed it myself. So I apologize for that. On my website, once in a while I post tips and tricks, and I try and write, I've only done one, but on MS SQL Tips, I blog about reporting services. And if you need to know how to do something and you can't find it, shoot me an email. Let me pull that slide up. You can go ahead and contact me, or you can get a hold of Pragmatics and they can get a hold of me. And I'm happy to either point you to the article that has something that you're looking for, or I can send you the code myself.
Okay, great. And it looks like we only have time for one more question, but if we didn't get to your question, don't worry. I will pull this report and I will email it over to Mickey so that she can have all your questions and, respond via blog post or however she would like. And
yeah, I'll write a blog post with the answers. Okay. I might send some answers to you if I can't post it quickly. Also, this presentation, can I give you the presentation, Rachel?
Sure, yeah, you can absolutely give it to me and I can send it out whenever I get a request.
Great. And then I have it on my blog as well.
Okay, and it's also being recorded, so if you want to refer back to this exact presentation, it'll be posted by tomorrow on our website under our Learning Center and under free training, so you can also watch that. And our last question is from Peter, and it is, in the first presentation, in the first Tablix, do territory groups and country region have the same data sets? Meaning, does country region have territory?
Country region, yes. The country region has territory. So the territories, and then there were countries in each territory.